Yo, what's good YouTube fam? Pat here, back with another how to play video for Epic 7, and this one is on Miss Manatanks herself, the character I probably should have made a video for months ago, and that is Mercedes. As with all of the how to play videos, I'll be going super in depth and covering things such as her stats, her skills, some possible endgame equipment builds for you to try and experiment with, as well as some pointers on how I think best to use her in World Arena. With the introduction out of the way, let's move right on to Mercedes stats. Mercedes is a fire mage of the Scorpio zodiac symbol. She shares a stat line with Challenger Dominion and of course Celestial Mercedes as well. Taking a look at her stats, she has 1,187 attack, 4,491 health, 101 speed, 627 defense, 27% critical hit chance, 160% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or effect resistance. This is a really good stat line overall for a mage, especially a 4-star mage. It has very good attack, very good defense, really high starting crit hit chance, and obviously you get that bonus 10% critical hit damage as well to boot. The only problem with this stat line is that it has absolutely abysmal health and very low speed, especially for a damage dealer. So when you're building Mercedes, these are going to be the two biggest hurdles I feel like for most players to try to clear. You're going to absolutely struggle in the health and speed departments. Before we move on to the next section, as a bit of fun trivia, in the English dub of Epic 7, Mercedes is voiced by Joy Osmansky. She isn't primarily known for her voice acting roles. She's more of someone who you would see appear on various TV shows on networks like the CW, and she also is on some shows on Hulu as well as Netflix. In the Japanese dub of Epic 7, Mercedes is voiced by Sakuraba Arisa, who is an up-and-coming Japanese voice actress. You can hear her as various different side characters or background characters in anime such as Jujutsu Kaisen and Vivi Fluorite Eye's Song. Before we can talk about Mercedes' skills in depth, we first have to talk about powering her up, and you do that by clearing episode 3 of the story. Upon clearing episode 3, two things will happen. First, Mercedes will receive a new passive skill attached to her S3, the Blazing Eye of Kal. That new passive is called Volatility. Volatility grants Mercedes a passive 15% attack increase, but it also increases the damage that she will take from all sources by 10%. The second thing that will happen is you will unlock a new stage called the Final Destination. Completing Final Destination will change the skill Volatility into Immense Power. Immense Power, just like Volatility, is attached to the S3 skill. Immense Power is a passive that will increase Mercedes' attack by 15% like Volatility, but you will not incur that extra 10% damage increase. Instead, when Mercedes receives lethal damage, she will revive one time with 50% health. Immense Power is unaffected by any effects related to buffs, so essentially they can't stop the revive from happening, and they cannot stop the 15% damage increase on the character. Additionally, completing Final Destination will grant you the artifact Magic for Friends, which is an artifact that can only be equipped by Mercedes. Magic for Friends decreases the damage suffered from all critical hits by 25%, and it does not stack with any other damage reduction passives. Additionally, if an ally, including Mercedes herself, is attacked when it's not Mercedes' turn, there's a 15% chance that she will counter with her S2 attack, Dimensional Rupture, and we will talk more about Dimensional Rupture in the skill section right after this. The counter portion of Magic for Friends can only be activated once every 2 turns. Leveling this artifact does not increase its skills at all, so please keep that in mind. That said, you absolutely should have Magic for Friends leveled to plus 30 because it gives you a massive 702 HP, which for a character with this poor of a health total really needs it. For all of the calculations I'm going to be doing in this video, I assume that you have Mercedes powered up and that you have Magic for Friends level to plus 30. It is the only artifact I would play on this character, no questions asked. Not playing it is like volunteering to play a character with no S3 skill. It is really that important, and we'll talk about why it's super important when we talk about Dimensional Rupture in the next section. Mercedes S1 is Divine Bolt, not to be confused with the move of the same name that Celestial Mercedes has. It has a 0.9x attack multiplier. It will attack the target as well as one other random target on the enemy team. Additionally, it will increase the combat readiness of Mercedes by 15%. While this damage is low compared to other S1s in Epic 7, I think we can excuse it because it does actually hit 2 targets, so statistically it's doing a bit more damage than the standard S1. Also, that CR boost, while it's not as good as a character like Landy's, does allow counter set to be a viable option on her, and it does let you circumvent that speed loss that you will lose, obviously, if you pick up the counter set. More importantly than all of that, though, this S1 and the fact that the rest of her kit is AoE makes her a stellar Blooming Snaglich character. She is arguably the best Blooming Snaglich character in the entire game, and she is a free unit. Everyone has access to her. You start the game with Mercedes basically on your account, so you probably should be using her, just saying. Mercedes S2 is Dimensional Rupture, and in my opinion is the best move on the character. Not to be confused with the Dimensional Rupture that Celestial Mercedes has. You acquire 1 soul upon usage, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. It is an AoE attack with a 0.7x attack multiplier. There is a 55 to 70% chance, depending on Molagora, for this move to dispel 1 buff from all enemies. Starting at 3 or fewer enemies on the enemy team, the damage of Dimensional Rupture will increase by 30% for each missing member of the enemy team. This means that if there are only 2 members left on the enemy team, Dimensional Rupture will deal an extra 60% damage, and if there's only 1, it will deal an additional 90% damage. On top of all of that, after Mercedes uses Dimensional Rupture, if she had an attack buff, she will cast Dimensional Rupture a second time, but it deals 50% reduced damage. Having a Dispel on this move is nice, but it isn't the reason why I think this is the best move in the kit. Dimensional Rupture has seriously big damage potential. With an attack buff, her immense power buff, and the second cast of this move stapled onto it, it does quite a bit of damage, a lot more than you would think the multipliers would suggest. I've seen a lot of characters absolutely melt from back-to-back Dimensional Ruptures, and against certain team compositions such as Cleave, it can outright kill the entire enemy team. And this is before we talk about Magic for Friends. Remember, if you're wearing Magic for Friends, this is the move that you will be countering with. If you have an attack buff, you will counter with 2 times Dimensional Ruptures, which can be absolutely backbreaking. Those 2x counter AoE attacks is why I put so much emphasis on this move in the previous section. 2 AoE counters, by the way, isn't even the best part of Magic for Friends. Magic for Friends activating isn't classified as a counterattack by the game, which means you can use it to counter moves that typically cannot be countered. That Landy that just S3'd your entire team that thinks she's safe from counters, she's not. Mercedes S3 is the Blazing Eye of Cal. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and has a 3 to 4 turn cooldown depending on Molagora. It is an AoE attack with a 1.15x multiplier. Additionally, the damage of the move is increased by 20% if Mercedes lands a critical hit. On top of that, it will give an attack buff to all allies for 2 turns after the move deals damage. Perhaps the strangest part of Blazing Eye of Cal is that the move has an extra 20% damage on landing a critical hit. Originally, this move had better Molagora scaling, but for some reason it was lowered and the critical hit clause was added, and at the end of the day, the damage is functionally the same. I have no idea why. Were the devs afraid of someone playing some kind of like crazy high effectiveness build that didn't have any crit chance on it for some reason? I guess we'll never know. The more important part of this move is the attack buff, however. It is super welcome. Not only does it set up the double Dimensional Rupture, but it can renew the attack buff for your team. Typically, you'll be using another hero to give Mercedes her attack buff before her first turn, so that way she can immediately use the back-to-back Dimensional Rupture on the enemy team. When the attack buff is starting to wear off on your team, you can have the turn cycle back around to Mercedes and have her use Blazing Eye of Cal to essentially give your team 100% attack buff uptime, which is super awesome, because now your big burst mage does not only big burst damage, but she provides quite a bit of utility as well. For Mercedes Soulburn, it changes the multiplier on Dimensional Rupture at the cost of 10 souls. Instead of being a 0.7x multiplier for the AoE, it becomes a 0.9x multiplier. Yes, you will absolutely pay 10 souls for this move to do a lot more damage. Usually, when the enemy doesn't have any more mitigation on their team and they're not all blue units, a Soulburn Dimensional Rupture will basically wipe them outright, especially if you have an attack buff. So, yes, it is a very good Soulburn, in my opinion. For Molagora priorities, you absolutely want to be maxing S2 Dimensional Rupture because it is basically the best part of the kit. You are using this move most frequently. It is the move you're countering with. It is what the bulk of your turns are going to be. So obviously you want it to hit as hard as possible. After that, I would probably max Blazing Eye of Cal because it has great multipliers and it is an AoE attack and you'll be using it whenever it's available and Dimensional Rupture is not available. After that, you'll probably be maxing Divine Bolt last. Since this is a damage dealer, I highly recommend that you get this character to plus 15. However, I wouldn't fault you for having the character as just plus 5 if you only intend to use her as an answer to cleave, or as plus 10 if all you really care about is using Dimensional Rupture and making sure that your off turns do at least some amount of damage. Mercedes has had one of the most impressive glups in Epic 7. She went from being borderline useless to one of the best red damage dealers for PvP, as well as an all-star in some PvE content. She boasts some pretty impressive damage thanks to her great offensive stat spread, especially when you consider that this is only a 4-star character. While the multipliers on her may be low, the damage amp that she does get from immense power makes it feel a whole heck of a lot higher. Also, her amazing synergy with Adventurer Raz is not only a flavor win, but also a win I feel for the player base. That joke about her being a bootleg Mashu Kyrielite from Fate Grand Order, I think, can finally be laid to rest. Regardless of how few units you have or how new you are to this game, knowing that both Raz and Mercedes will scale into incredible heroes that work in a large amount of content is a breath of fresh air in this genre. Normally, gacha games give you trash for free characters. Not the case here, obviously. Lastly, we again have to talk about Magic for Friends since it provides her with a great niche in the PvP meta. We've desperately needed a way to counter specific can't be countered units for a while now. It's basically a poor design philosophy from an era when Charles was basically correcting everyone's postures left and right. Many players have many different needs, so I feel like it's only appropriate for this character build section for the first build that we talk about something that is well-rounded and will work for most players. For a general use Mercedes that is good in PvE as well as PvP, we are going to be on a speed set. I have chosen the primary offset to be immunity, but if you only care about using Mercedes for PvE content such as Blooming Snaglich Expeditions or something like Abyss or even Raid, you can play Crit Chance. When we take a look at the desired stats, we want 3,500 attack, and that is simply so that we can do damage, which is her primary role. 1200 defense, so that she has some survivability. Mages tend to have higher defense than health stats, so it is easier for Mercedes to survive if you build defense first and health second. 10,000 health, this is the hardest stat I feel like to get higher on Mercedes because she has such a poor base health stat. You need quite a lot of percentage health in order to get even this far. So anything over 10,000 I think is great. For speed, we're looking at 200, which is not too difficult, I feel like, to hit for most players. I believe it is something around 30 speed total amongst the 6 pieces. So it's not super hard for you to hit this on speed set. I feel like Mercedes in general on this build really excels when she gets a bit faster with these stat lines. So if you can get to like 210, then I would go for that for sure. She is still fine at 200. I just think obviously the faster you can go with these stats, the better. We're looking at 100 critical hit chance, so that way she can always land those crits and do her job. And then for critical hit damage, we want 270% or better. I feel like this is reasonably easy for a lot of players to hit. As you can see on your screen, I have 262, but I'm still missing 2 reforges. I feel like after you reforge with Mercedes, it should be relatively easy for most players to at least hit that 3,500 attack, 270 crit damage threshold with over 200 speed. If you can't hit those offensive stats, obviously, as always, you can sacrifice a little bit of health, a little bit of defense to make sure that it is done. Taking a look at the right side, we're on a crit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, and speed boots. The artifact, of course, is Magic for Friends, as we've discussed earlier in this video. When we take a look at the per piece average, it is going to be 17% attack per piece, 12% crit chance, unless, of course, you are on a crit set, in which case it is a little bit lower. And when we look at the other pieces, you want to have some amount of survivability in the third slot, like either health or defense. And then, obviously, in that last slot, we want something like crit damage or speed to make up the missing numbers. The second build to talk about is a lifesteal build for Mercedes. I personally do not play this build, although I have played against it in high-end World Arena. I have seen others have success with it, and I know guildmates who have used it as well. So when I show you the desired stats, it's basically going to be an average of what I have found when doing my research and due diligence for this video. Looking at the primary sets, we are on Lifesteal with the obvious offset to be immunity because we are a bit slower and we want to try to avoid debuffs whenever possible. Obviously, if you don't have immunity, you can use crit chance, but I think immunity at the end of the day is a bit better. Looking at the desired stats, the attack is 3,600. I feel like most Mercedes builds are fine as long as they're between 3,500 and 3,800. I started the previous one at 3,500 because it was the general use one. And I felt like most players, even the newer players, would be fine trying to hit that lower threshold. If you can go higher than 36, 35, 37, whatever number here, that's great. Just make sure you don't miss any of the other stats. Defense is still the same at 1,200 or higher. Obviously, you can go up to 1,300 if you have the ability to do so. The health, I jumped it up a little bit to 11k because since you're on lifesteal and you're going to be replenishing health, you kind of want a little bit more bulk without sacrificing too much damage. You need the damage in order to get the healing percentage up there, and then obviously you need the bulk in order to be able to actually live on a slower set. We have 180 speed. This is somewhat similar to the amount of speed per piece that you're going to be looking for compared to the speed set. Obviously, you don't have the speed bonus, but I think it's something around like 7%. Or should say 7 speed per piece as opposed to like 5 or 6 like it was in the speed set. So not too much of a difference in terms of average speed piece quality. Obviously, critical hit chance is the same at 100%. Crit hit damage is a little bit lower because for some reason these builds usually average a little bit lower than the speed builds. But obviously, if you still want to use 270, 280 crit damage, you can do that just fine. Taking a look at the right side, nothing has really changed here. It's still crit damage necklace, attack percentage ring, speed boots, and the artifact is still Magic for Friends. The per piece average is very similar. It is now 19% attack as opposed to 17. Still the same amount of crit chance unless you obviously again are on a crit hit chance set. And then you want either HP or defense, some survivability stat in that third slot, and then obviously again speed or crit damage in that fourth slot. So now we come to the final build of the video, which is a much requested Degen Mercedes build. I'll be honest with all of you. I've played this build before when they first gave Mercedes her buffs, and I don't really think it's particularly great. However, I am including it not only for completeness sake, but its best use is against cleave players because you're just trying to get a really powerful counter attack off the S1 or a powerful Magic for Friends proc. And new players or players who don't have a lot of units might not have answers to cleave, so I think it is worth it to include a counter set Mercedes build whose only job is to try to pray to get a Magic for Friends proc or pray and hit a counter proc to try to win you the game. She is available to everybody. Again, not everyone has answers to cleave, so having a Mercedes that is just a specialist versus cleave I think is fine for newer and intermediate players who just, again, don't have those options. Looking at the desired stats, you want 3,800 attack or higher. Again, we're just trying to hit really hard on this build. The speed, when we get to that, is going to fluctuate a bit. It's going to depend on your gear. Defense and health are a bit higher than even the lifesteal build because, again, you are going to be super slow on this build compared to the other builds, so you really need to make sure that this character can take a hit. The speed, I left it as base. You can go as fast as you want, as whatever your gear dictates. If you have a ton of crazy fast counter gear and can still hit those offensive stat spreads and still get some decent bulk on the character, go for it. I've seen 140, 150 speed counter Mercedes. Those will work. I've decided to just leave it at base in order to just get more stats because I feel like the character naturally having Magic for Friends counter proc means that you will have, I feel like, more success for a general use case when you are on those lifesteal, those speed builds. Again, this is just for people who are just really, I feel like, want to just play counter and just really pray that they get that counter or that Magic for Friends proc again. 100% critical hit chance, 280 critical hit damage. Looking at the right side, damage is still critical hit damage. Looking at the ring and the boots, though, it's going to be either be HP ring or attack ring, and then obviously the reverse for the boots. So if you're on HP ring, you want attack boots. If you're on attack ring, you want HP boots. Although you could have some crazy gear, I guess, and do something like attack ring, attack boots. Heck, you could probably, again, use a speed boot. If you have a speed boot that's on counter set that gives like 40% attack, by all means, you can use that as well. Artifact, again, Magic for Friends. Reason has stayed the same throughout the entire video. Looking at the per piece average, I have 24% attack here, but it need not be that high because as you can see in the last slot, I have flat attack. Remember, flat attack is really important in order to hit your goals. If you cannot get the attack percentage needed, you can get something like maybe say 18% attack on a piece, but like 100 flat attack to supplement the missing attack. So it's kind of like you're combining them to get one big massive stat. You really want 24% attack or better to get a stat line like this for Mercedes. Obviously still need 12% critical hit chance, 10% crit damage per piece, and then obviously whatever bulk stats, specifically defense, that's left over on the pieces for your gear. For teammate suggestions, the one that I feel like I have to bring up first and foremost is Adventurer Roz. The two main characters go super well together in the story, so why wouldn't they go super well together on a PvP team? Roz can protect Mercedes with not only the defense buff, but the plethora of artifacts he has at his disposal. And thanks to Mercedes' immense power buff, odds are when he's using his S2, she's the character that he's going to be calling upon. And that CR push is really nice, especially if you are on a slower build like the counter build or the lifesteal build. These two go super well together in PvP, and they're also pretty good together as well in PvE content, so if you want to try them there, you are more than welcome to do so. Obviously, Troublemaker Crozet is another great mitigation source for Mercedes. She works well in a lot of the same compositions that Landy does really well in. Those are comps where you have like an Arius and an off tank, so you have somebody like a Fallen Cecilia with a Roz or a Fallen Cecilia with like a Troublemaker Crozet. This is obviously really good for her. Troublemaker Crozet is also super good against Cleave in general, and Mercedes is obviously very good against Cleave as well, thanks to Dimensional Rupture, so I feel like the two pair very, very well together. On top of that, you really want to pair her with an attack buffer so that her first turn has that big impact. The two dimensional ruptures is the key, so you really want to be bringing an attack buffer with her. The best ones in the current metagame are obviously going to be things like Amelia, Maid Chloe, General Purgus, and Closer Charles. Which one you pick depends on your playstyle and what you're playing against, but all of these are really great because they will usually go before Mercedes and set her up for success throughout the match. For good matchups, being a high-powered red DPS, obviously Mercedes is going to be great against most of the green DPS in the format, Rimuru included. But I think she really excels against those characters that are unable to be countered. Think of things like Landy or Spectre Tenebria. Spectre is obviously one of particular note because Mercedes is only AoE attacks for the most part, so Spectre cannot hide from you. So if you're struggling for a counter to Spectre, Mercedes is a pretty good option overall. She's also really, really good against squishy teams overall because, again, all high damage AoE attacks. So if they're playing something like a Pavel Cleave or some other Cleave oriented setup that is not playing any form of mitigation on it, Mercedes is a slam dunk pick because a Magic for Friends proc into Dimensional Rupture is most likely a game winning play. For bad matchups, Mercedes, obviously being a red unit, is really bad against a lot of blue DPS in the format. She's really not super great against Kisei, not really good against Luna either. She's also particularly bad against those characters that punish a lot of AoE attacks. So a character like Rem, for example, or Seaside Bologna, these obviously are blue units, but they really punish you for having too much AoE on the team. Bellion is another character that's not particularly great to go against for Mercedes. It's why you don't see her as often as you used to. You do still see her, just not as often because Bellion on Elbrus Ritual Sword really punishes Mercedes very, very hard. Obviously, The last thing that I want to touch on here is Blood Moon Haste. Mercedes, the immense power buff that she gives you, is very akin to the revive passive on Arbiter Vildred, which means that if Blood Moon Haste is a really, really bad matchup, an almost unwinnable matchup for Arbiter Vildred, the same is true for Mercedes. If you see Blood Moon Haste on the opposing side, you basically must ban him because Mercedes becomes a massive liability for your team otherwise. And that is going to do it for the how to play on Mercedes. Hopefully this was of some help to you. If there's anything I missed, as always, let me know down in the comments below. In order to better help my viewers and give me a better understanding of what you guys are looking for in other videos, I have recently decided to open up a Discord server. So if you want to come and chat me up about specific builds, characters I have not yet touched upon, things you'd want to see in other how to play videos, or you just want to talk to me because I am a nerd that likes games and anime, you can definitely ask me all of those things on the Discord server. Link will be down in this video's description. And if you want to see more how to play videos of characters like this one, there should be a playlist on your screen now for you to check out. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your weekend, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a good one now.